I don't know that you will notice from there, but last week when I read, I stumbled a bit. This says giant print. So if I stumble this week, it's not because the print is too small. I'm going to be reading from the 24th chapter of Luke, verses 13 through 35. Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem and do not know the things that have happened here in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. David Durfee, a layman from the Vermont Conference, once told me that some neuroscientists had posited that the human mind can process up to 400 million bits of information at any given time, but that an individual is aware of only about 2,000 of those bits. There's a lot going on up there that we don't know about. David told me about an experiment in which a group of people, let's say the size of this group of people, were asked to form a circle and were given a ball. And the instructions were to pass the ball, I wanted to do this, pass the ball quickly to someone else in the circle and keep that up until they were told to stop. And in addition, each individual was told to keep a silent count of the number of times that the ball was passed from one person to another. And at the end, there would be a check to see if all had the same number. While the ball passing and counting were going on, a person in a gorilla suit walked into the circle, thumped his chest, and left. After stop was called and the numbers tallied, the participants were asked what they thought of the gorilla. Most of them said, "What gorilla?" Sometimes we are so taken up, so involved with all that is happening in our lives, work, family concerns and celebrations, health issues, children or parents or both, sometimes ours and sometimes those that belong to other people, community commitments, faith commitments, taxes this past week, right? Statistical reports, housework, yard work. You get the idea that we can't or we don't see what we are looking for or at. I know that when I'm looking for something or if I'm helping someone else look for something, it's very helpful for me to have an idea of the shape, color, size, or I'll miss it entirely. It's a very frustrating search for me when my description of what I'm looking for is off base from the physical reality of that item or that person. So here in the gospel this morning, in this reading that I've just done, we have two individuals described as disciples. One is said to be Cleopas, while the other goes unnamed. Some theologians have said they think maybe it was Cleopas's wife, because I guess in other readings she is found there. But oftentimes women's names are omitted. No matter, the point here is that we have two folks who have been very close to Jesus and the 12 disciples. They have been to Jerusalem for the Passover, and they are agitated. They are clearly in turmoil. As they walk along, we can imagine them going over the events of the week. Remember, for them, this is still Easter Day. Jesus' arrival in Jerusalem, occasioning a parade, the Passover meal, Judas's betrayal, the disciples' desertion, the trial, the scourging, and the awful moments and hours that became a crucifixion for the one they had hoped would be their salvation. Their friend and imagined Savior was dead. Their hopes were smashed. This is the third day of which he had spoken, and while some women say his tomb is empty, he is nowhere to be found. I'm sure that you can imagine the state of their minds, the information that they are trying to process, the ways in which their experience, their expectations have been dashed, the ways in which the shape and the colors and the life that they've been looking for may seem distorted. Surely you have had familiar or similar experiences when you have suffered such a loss, or when that all that you had expected and relied on to be possible falls apart. A 1999 article in the Christian Century written by Susan Andres from Maryland says in part, "On Sunday mornings in contemporary America, modern disciples, come straggling through the church door, weighed down by cynicism, stress, pretense, power. They are sophisticated lawyers and skeptical scientists and shell-shocked journalists, skilled practitioners in the seduction of the world, but nervous novices in the realm of the Spirit. They, like the first disciples, yearn for the living presence of God, but they are too preoccupied, suspicious, too busy to actually recognize God. In their objective world of fact and truth and matter and money, the church's world of mystery and meaning and risk and relationship seems silly. And so they are eager to discuss and debate the idea of God, but unprepared to recognize or to experience the presence of God. They do not yet realize that it will only be through pounding hearts that they will come to believe, that they will recognize Jesus. Perhaps we are not, as Susan says, sophisticated lawyers, although some, and skeptical scientists. Perhaps we are farmers and caretakers, teachers and managers and business folk and students and retirees. But I would assert that we suffer from the same condition. We often come to worship weighed down with the need for forgiveness, with doubt and denial and culture shock, or at least I hope culture shock, because I would like to think that there is a higher moral and ethical standard here than I often find in operation outside of here. But perhaps I am naive. Nevertheless, we come sometimes overwhelmed by the demands of our work and the despair of our neighbors and the crises in our world. And we long for that experience that is going to resonate with our particular energy, that is going to remind us that there is a Savior upon whom we can call and rely. We come to be reminded of the promises that we find in these stories, in the music, in the message, in the fellowship. We come to find the hope that is relayed through these stories and in the presence of a faith community that reminds us that we are not alone in that hope. The travelers that Jesus encountered on the road that resurrection day needed to hear a good word, and Jesus provided that word plentifully. But then he did something else. Or they did. They offered hospitality, and he accepted. They came to table together, and they stopped talking long enough for Jesus to break the bread. This action seemed to open their eyes. They had seen that somewhere before. Perhaps when he fed the 5,000, or any of the other places where he had broken bread and fed people. The bread for their bodies and the word for their souls. In that action, they remembered perhaps a scene or a story, words or actions that brought them to a point of recognition. All that time they had spent with him came flooding back, and they knew. Their hearts burned within them is the description that Luke gives. colleague once told me about a holy moment that he had had in his life, a time when Christ surprised him by his presence. He was visiting a church member who was dying of cancer. Near the end of the visit, he asked her for what she would like to hear him pray. And she expressed concern for her family members and a sick church staff member. As he bowed his head to pray, she got out of her recliner with great difficulty and knelt there at that chair. After he prayed, she prayed, and in her prayer, she prayed for him. He knew then that he had been in the presence of the living Christ, and he still treasures that moment. He says that a common thread in the holy moments he's been able to recall is that in each one, he was doing something God had called him to. In this case, visiting a sick woman. The two on the road to Emmaus insisted their traveling companion become their guest at table. They shared their bread and companionship with the stranger. Hospitality was something they, as Jews, were called to. It was then, in that act of hospitality, that they were blessed with recognizing the risen Christ. Today, I'm going to encourage you to faithfully do what God has given you to do. I believe that is where you will meet the risen Christ. I'm going to provide you with a loaf of bread. I don't know what else to call this. It is a full piece of bread. I'm going to call it a loaf. Roger made these for us last night. It's a bread called batore. It's an East Indian bread. And just so you'll know, it is made with whole wheat flour and organic yogurt. And it's like a pita pocket. It's a bread shared a recipe with a friend, and that friend now shares the bread with you. It is a bread I often use for communion. Once you have received your bread, you may want to spend some time holding it, smelling it, looking at it, and reflecting on the times in your lives when Christ's Spirit has made itself known to you. You can tell today's gospel story or a story of your own, or invite and listen to someone else's story. But use this bread, this gift that God has provided, to render blessing in your own life and perhaps in the life of another. You never know who might be walking and waiting for such a blessing. Open yourselves to it. Let us pray. Risen Christ, in Emmaus you met the two as you walked with them. Be our companion on the way. Open the scriptures to us. Feed us with the bread of life. Make our hearts burn with desire for you, and give us the courage to witness to your life and presence wherever our journey takes us. Amen.